The emergency alert system in Haven's Rest had exactly 3 settings: routine maintenance, equipment malfunction, and something large and alien is approaching the perimeter, which meant Dr. Ethan Cross was having the kind of morning that would require significantly more coffee than the settlement's rationing system typically allowed. He grabbed his medical kit and portable scanner, already mentally cataloging the various ways his day could go catastrophically wrong. "Doc, we need you at the north gate immediately," crackled Security Chief Morrison's voice through the comm system. "We've got a situation with one of those giant natives." Ethan paused in his preparation, recognizing the particular tone Morrison used when discussing the Valari, a mixture of fear, frustration, and poorly concealed hostility that had made diplomatic relations between the colony and the indigenous population increasingly strained over the past year. "What kind of situation?" Ethan asked, though he was already heading toward the gate complex. "The big one's hurt. Bad. Looks like something tried to eat her, but she managed to crawl close enough to trigger our proximity sensors before collapsing." The Valari that lay crumpled outside Haven's Rest's defensive perimeter was indeed large, even by the standards of her species. She measured at least 12 feet from head to toe, with the characteristic pointed ears and shifting skin pigmentation that marked her people as one of the more remarkable evolutionary developments on Kepler 438b. Right now, her skin showed the mottled gray-green coloration that Ethan had learned indicated severe pain and distress. "Jesus," whispered Colonial Administrator Walsh, who'd arrived with a security detail and the expression of someone whose day had just become infinitely more complicated. "Is she alive?" Ethan knelt beside the fallen Valari, his scanner revealing vital signs that were weak but stable. Her injuries were extensive, deep lacerations across her torso, what appeared to be multiple broken ribs, and signs of systemic toxicity that suggested she'd been poisoned by whatever had attacked her. "She's alive, but barely. I need to get her to the medical bay immediately." "Absolutely not," Walsh said firmly. "We don't know what diseases these creatures might carry, or whether this is some kind of trap." "Administrator, she's dying. And she's not a creature, the Valari are clearly intelligent. They have language, culture, technology adapted to their environment. They have pointed sticks and tree houses," Morrison interjected. "That doesn't make them sentient." Ethan looked at the security chief with the particular expression he reserved for people who confused ignorance with wisdom. "They have a complex social structure, artistic traditions, and what appears to be a sophisticated understanding of planetary ecology. Just because their technology doesn't look like ours doesn't mean they're not intelligent." "This is not a debate about xenobiology," Walsh said. "This is a security issue. We cannot bring an unknown alien into our settlement. Then she dies out here, and when her people find her body, they'll assume we killed her." The administrator paused, clearly calculating political ramifications. The colony's relationship with the Valari had been deteriorating for months, marked by a series of misunderstandings and territorial disputes that had escalated from minor incidents to genuine concerns about armed conflict. "Fine," Walsh said eventually. "You can treat her in the external medical station. But she doesn't come inside the main perimeter, and she gets a full security detail at all times." The external medical station was a prefabricated unit designed for treating colonists who might have been exposed to biological hazards, which meant it had basic life support and medical equipment but none of the advanced facilities Ethan would need for complex trauma surgery. He began working immediately, using every technique he'd learned during his years as a frontier medic to stabilize injuries that were unlike anything in his medical training. Valari physiology was fascinating and frustrating in equal measure. Their cardiovascular system operated on different principles than human circulation, their bone structure was designed for their massive frames but created unique challenges for fracture treatment, and their nervous system seemed to process pain and healing in ways that human medical science hadn't adequately documented. "What do you think attacked her?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the colony's xenobiologist, who'd arrived to assist with the medical procedures. "Nothing I recognize," Ethan replied, studying tissue samples under his portable microscope. "These wounds were made by something with sophisticated understanding of Valari anatomy. See how the cuts avoided major blood vessels while causing maximum pain and mobility loss. That's oddly specific. Natural predators usually go for quick kills, not prolonged suffering. Exactly. And this toxicity, he gestured to the scanner readings, it's not from any native flora or fauna I've catalogued. This is something engineered to specifically target Valari biology. Sarah's expression grew troubled. You're suggesting someone deliberately attacked her? I'm suggesting that whatever happened to her wasn't random predation. Someone or something specifically hunted her using weapons designed to cause suffering rather than death. The Valari, whom Ethan had started thinking of as his patient rather than as an alien specimen, remained unconscious for 3 days while he worked to counteract the toxins in her system and stabilize her injuries. During that time, he found himself talking to her, partly because medical training had taught him that unconscious patients sometimes responded to familiar voices, and partly because the isolation of treating a 12-foot-tall alien woman was beginning to affect his mental state. You know, he said while changing her bandages, your people's approach to medicine is probably more sophisticated than ours in some ways. We've documented your use of symbiotic plant relationships for healing, and your understanding of ecosystem balance suggests medical knowledge that goes beyond individual treatment to population health. Her skin color shifted slightly, from gray-green to something approaching normal golden brown, which Ethan had learned to interpret as a positive sign. I don't know if you can hear me, but I want you to know that not all humans are like Administrator Walsh. Some of us recognize intelligence when we see it, and some of us believe that helping others is more important than following bureaucratic protocols. On the 3rd day, she opened her eyes. They were large, even by Valari standards, and held the kind of intelligence that made arguments about sentience seem embarrassingly naive. When she saw Ethan leaning over her with a medical scanner, her first reaction was to try to sit up, a movement that would have been impressive if it hadn't immediately reopened several of her wounds. Easy, Ethan said gently, placing his hands on her shoulders in what he hoped was a calming gesture. You're safe. You're injured, but you're healing. She studied his face with careful attention, and Ethan realized she was evaluating him according to criteria he couldn't understand. Her skin color shifted through several variations before settling on a warm amber tone that seemed to indicate cautious acceptance. Human, she said in heavily accented but clear standard colonial. You helped me. I'm a doctor. Helping people is what I do. People. She seemed puzzled by the word choice. Intelligent beings. Individuals who can think and feel and make choices. That includes you. Her expression suggested this was not the response she'd expected from a human. Your leader, he did not want me here. My leader is an idiot, Ethan said, then immediately regretted the unprofessional comment. I mean, Administrator Walsh has security concerns, but medical ethics override political considerations. She almost smiled, an expression that transformed her face from merely alien to remarkably beautiful. You have interesting concepts of authority. What's your name? Ethan asked, settling into the chair he'd positioned beside her medical bed. I am Thera, daughter of Linera, keeper of the healing songs of the Moonweaver clan. She paused, studying his expression. You may not understand the significance of those titles. I understand that they're important to you, which makes them important to me. I'm Dr. Ethan Cross, and I'm very glad to meet you, Thera. Dr. Ethan Cross, she repeated carefully. You are the human who stood between me and death. I'm the human who happened to know how to treat your injuries. Anyone with medical training would have done the same thing. Her skin color shifted to deep blue-green, which Ethan was beginning to recognize as the Valari equivalent of skeptical amusement. I do not think your people would agree with that assessment. She was probably right, Ethan reflected. Most of the colonists viewed the Valari as obstacles to successful settlement rather than as potential neighbors, and Administrator Walsh had made it clear that resources spent on alien medical care were resources wasted on colonial priorities. Tell me about your injuries, Ethan said, changing the subject to safer ground. What attacked you? Thera's skin color shifted to dark red-purple, and her expression became guarded. Not what, Dr. Ethan Cross? Who? Teaching a 12-foot-tall alien woman to appreciate human coffee turned out to be significantly more challenging than Ethan had anticipated, particularly when her people's concept of warm beverages apparently involved fermented plant extracts that could double as industrial solvents. Thurah's reaction to his carefully prepared morning coffee was educational. "This liquid is bitter and makes my tongue feel strange," she announced, holding the reinforced mug that Ethan had requisitioned from the engineering department. "Are you certain it is not a form of medicine?" "It is a form of medicine," Ethan replied, settling into his chair with his own cup. "Just not the kind that cures diseases. More the kind that cures the inability to function before 10 in the morning." Her skin shifted through several shades of confused yellow-green before settling on amused gold. "Humans require chemical assistance to achieve consciousness." "Some humans require chemical assistance to achieve consciousness. Other humans are naturally cheerful in the morning and are generally considered dangerous by the rest of us." Thurah's laugh was like music played on instruments designed for frequencies human ears weren't quite equipped to detect. "Valari, wake with the sun and begin each day by singing gratitude to the growing things. Perhaps your morning rituals explain why humans seem always to be rushing toward something." "What do you mean?" "Your people move through life as if they are fleeing from something terrible, or chasing something precious that might escape. Valari move through life as if we are part of it, not separate from it." Ethan considered this while sipping his coffee and trying to ignore the fact that his patient was providing surprisingly sophisticated cultural analysis while sitting in a medical bed that had required structural reinforcement to support her weight. "Tell me about Valari healing traditions," he said. "I've seen evidence that your people understand medicine in ways that human science is just beginning to explore." "Healing is not separate from living," Thurah explained, her posture becoming more formal as she shifted into what Ethan was learning to recognize as her professional mode. "Human medicine treats symptoms, fixes broken parts, fights diseases like enemies to be defeated. Valari healing recognizes that illness comes from imbalance, and restoration comes from understanding the connections between individual health and community well-being." "That sounds like holistic medicine taken to a logical extreme." "What is holistic medicine?" Ethan found himself explaining human medical philosophy to someone whose people had apparently developed more sophisticated approaches to healthcare than anything taught in his medical training. The conversation was interrupted by Administrator Walsh's arrival, flanked by Security Chief Morrison and looking like someone who discovered that his carefully organized day had been hijacked by forces beyond his control. "Dr. Cross," Walsh said, his tone carrying the particular inflection reserved for subordinates who'd become inconvenient, "we need to discuss the situation with your patient." "Her name is Thurah," Ethan said mildly. "And what situation are you referring to?" "The situation where we have a 12-foot-tall alien taking up residence in our medical facility while her people are massing for what appears to be a military operation." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean, massing?" Morrison activated his portable display, showing aerial reconnaissance footage of the forest surrounding Haven's Rest. "As of this morning, we count at least 200 Valari gathering in the woodland territories north of the settlement. War paint, weapons, and organizational patterns consistent with preparation for large-scale conflict." Thurah's skin color shifted to deep crimson, and she struggled to sit up despite her injuries. "War paint? You are certain?" "The patterns are unmistakable," Morrison continued. "Red and black geometric designs, ceremonial weapons, and what appears to be ritual scarification among the leadership caste." "They are not preparing for war," Thurah said urgently. "They are preparing for mourning ceremonies. The red and black patterns are grief markings, not war paint. The ceremonial weapons are for funeral rites, not battle." Walsh and Morrison exchanged skeptical glances. "And why would they be conducting funeral ceremonies?" Walsh asked. "Because they believe I am dead," Thurah replied quietly. "I have been missing for many days. My absence means my people think I have been killed, and they are gathering to honor my memory and elect a new cultural mediator." "Cultural mediator?" Ethan asked. I serve as translator between Valari clans, resolver of disputes, keeper of traditional knowledge. My death would require formal ceremonies and the selection of a replacement, which involves representatives from many different tribal groups. Morrison's expression remained unconvinced. That's convenient. You're saying that what looks like military preparation is actually a funeral. Thorah's skin color shifted to the dark blue-green that Ethan had learned indicated frustration. Your people see weapons and assume violence. Valari used the same tools for ceremony, hunting, construction, and protection. The difference is in intention and context, not in appearance. Which brings us to the fundamental problem, Walsh said. We can't verify your people's intentions, and we can't afford to guess wrong. If those are war parties gathering outside our settlement, we need to take defensive action. And if they're mourning parties gathering to honor their dead, Ethan said, and we respond with military aggression, we'll create the very war you're trying to prevent. That's a risk we'll have to take. No, Thorah said firmly. That is a risk you do not have to take. Return me to my people. Let them see that I am alive and healing. The mourning ceremonies will end, and the tribal representatives will return to their territories. Absolutely not, Morrison said. You're our only source of intelligence about Valari intentions and capabilities. Releasing you could compromise our security. Keeping me prisoner will definitely compromise your security, Thorah replied, and her tone carried subtle harmonics that suggested she was using some form of emotional projection. My people are not violent by nature, but they value loyalty and protection of family above all other considerations. If they believe humans have killed their cultural mediator. She let the implication hang in the recycled air of the medical station. Walsh was quiet for several minutes, clearly calculating political and military ramifications. Finally, he sighed with the sound of someone making decisions he didn't want to make. You'll remain here under medical supervision until Dr. Cross certifies that you're fully recovered. Then we'll arrange a supervised release at the settlement perimeter, with full documentation of your treatment and condition. How long? Thorah asked. Dr. Cross, what's your medical assessment? Ethan looked at his patient, whose injuries were healing with remarkable speed but who still showed signs of systemic stress from her attack. Another week, minimum. Possibly longer if complications develop. A week might be too long, Thorah said quietly. Mourning ceremonies traditionally last 7 days. If I do not return before they conclude, my people will assume I am truly dead and will begin planning retribution against whoever they believe killed me. Who would they blame? Morrison asked. The same people they blame for the disappearance of our other healers and mediators over the past months. The same people they believe are systematically hunting Valari leadership. Walsh went very still. What other disappearances? 3 healers, 2 cultural mediators, and 1 tribal elder have vanished in the last season. All found dead or never found at all. All killed by the same methods that nearly killed me. Ethan felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. Thorah, you said earlier that you were attacked by someone, not something. Do you know who? I know that my attackers used weapons designed to cause pain rather than death. I know that they knew exactly how to incapacitate Valari physiology without killing immediately. I know that they spoke human languages while they worked. The medical station fell completely silent except for the hum of life support systems and the distant sounds of colonial activity. You're saying humans have been hunting your people? Walsh asked slowly. I am saying that humans have been murdering my people, Thorah corrected, her skin shifting to deep red that Ethan now recognized as suppressed anger. And I am saying that Dr. Ethan Cross is the first human I have encountered who treated me as a person rather than a target. She looked directly at Ethan with an expression that seemed to cut through all his assumptions about interspecies relations. Which is why I must ask you a question, Dr. Ethan Cross. When my people come to retrieve my body, and they find me alive under human protection, will they believe that you saved me, or will they believe that you captured me? The sacred grove that Thorah described existed in the intersection between human territorial maps and Valari cultural reality, which meant it was simultaneously empty wilderness according to colonial surveys and the spiritual heart of indigenous civilization according to people who'd lived on the planet for thousands of years. This discrepancy was about to become significantly more than an academic dispute. The memory trees store our entire history, Thera explained while Ethan helped her through physical therapy exercises designed for someone whose arm span was roughly equivalent to his height. Every song, every story, every piece of knowledge accumulated over generations. They are not just trees, they are living libraries, genetic repositories, cultural archives. And someone is destroying them. Systematically. 3 groves have been eliminated in the past season. The trees are burned, their root systems poisoned, their genetic material corrupted beyond recovery. Her skin color shifted to the dark purple that Ethan had learned indicated profound grief. It is not random destruction. Someone understands exactly what they are destroying and why it matters. Ethan paused in his documentation of her recovery progress, struck by the implications of what she was describing. Thera, that's genocide. Not just killing individuals, but eliminating an entire culture's ability to preserve and transmit knowledge. Yes. And it requires someone with extensive understanding of Valari society, biology, and cultural practices. The uncomfortable truth was beginning to crystallize in Ethan's mind. Someone with access to colonial research databases, someone who understood both human military tactics and Valari vulnerabilities, someone who could operate without oversight in the territory surrounding Haven's Rest. His comm unit buzzed with an incoming message from Administrator Walsh, requesting an immediate meeting in the Colonial Administrative Center. The timing was suspicious, but refusing would create more problems than compliance. I have to attend a staff meeting, he told Thera. Will you be all right here for a few hours? Dr. Ethan Cross, she said seriously, I need to warn you about something. My people's approaching mourning ceremonies, they are not just cultural events. They are also strategic gatherings where tribal leaders share intelligence about threats to Valari survival. What kind of intelligence? The kind that might include information about which humans have been collaborating with the hunters who are killing my people. Ethan felt cold understanding wash over him. You think there are humans involved in the attacks on the memory groves? I think there are humans organizing the attacks on the memory groves. The precision, the coordination, the specific targeting of cultural leadership, this is not random violence. This is systematic elimination designed to prepare for something larger. The administrative meeting was held in the Colonial Conference Room, a space designed to project authority and efficiency but which actually resembled a sterile box filled with uncomfortable furniture and the lingering smell of reconstituted coffee. Administrator Walsh presided over a gathering that included Security Chief Morrison, Colonial Engineer Davidson, and 2 people Ethan didn't recognize, a woman in expensive civilian clothes and a man whose military bearing suggested professional soldier rather than colonial security. Dr. Cross, Walsh began, I'd like you to meet Ms. Rebecca Torres from Kepler Mining Consortium and Captain Kane from Torres Security Solutions. They're here to discuss the developing situation with the native population. Ethan settled into his chair while mentally cataloging everything wrong with this scenario. Mining Consortium representatives didn't typically attend colonial security meetings unless they had financial interests that required military protection. Private security contractors didn't typically operate in territories under colonial command jurisdiction unless someone was circumventing official channels. Dr. Cross, Ms. Torres said, we understand you've been providing medical treatment to one of the native specimens. I've been providing medical treatment to an intelligent individual who was severely injured, Ethan corrected. Her name is Thera, and she's a cultural mediator for her people. Yes, well, terminology aside, we're concerned about the intelligence you might have gathered during your interactions with the creature. The casual dehumanization was deliberate, Ethan realized. Torres was testing his reactions, determining whether he could be trusted to support whatever operation they were planning. What kind of intelligence are you interested in? He asked carefully. Captain Kane leaned forward with the focused attention of someone accustomed to extracting information from reluctant sources. Population centers, tribal hierarchies, resource locations, defensive capabilities. Standard threat assessment data. I'm a doctor, not an intelligence officer. My interactions with Thura have been focused on medical treatment and basic cultural exchange. Cultural exchange, Torres repeated with a smile that contained no warmth. How interesting. And what has your cultural exchange revealed about native territorial claims? That the Valari have sophisticated understanding of planetary ecology and resource management that could be valuable for sustainable colonial development. Sustainable development, Torres said, is not cost-effective when dealing with primitive populations that refuse to recognize the benefits of modern resource extraction techniques. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking together with horrible clarity. The systematic targeting of Valari leadership, the destruction of cultural sites, the presence of mining consortium representatives with private military contractors, this wasn't random violence. This was preparation for large-scale resource extraction that required elimination of indigenous resistance. Ms. Torres, Ethan said slowly, are you suggesting that Valari territorial claims are interfering with mining operations? I'm suggesting that primitive cultures often fail to appreciate the economic benefits that modern resource extraction can bring to underdeveloped planets. Sometimes, education campaigns are necessary to help them understand new realities. Education campaigns? Captain Kane's expression suggested that his definition of education involved significantly more firepower than Ethan was comfortable considering. Dr. Cross, colonial development requires difficult decisions. Sometimes, humanitarian concerns must be balanced against practical necessities. What practical necessities? Administrator Walsh cleared his throat diplomatically. Dr. Cross, the colonial charter includes provisions for resource development that serves the greater good of human expansion. When native populations prove uncooperative with development initiatives, alternative approaches become necessary. The room fell silent while Ethan processed what he was hearing. The colonial administration was actively collaborating with private mining interests to eliminate Valari opposition to resource extraction. The systematic killing of cultural leaders, the destruction of sacred sites, the coordinated attacks on tribal infrastructure, all of it was preparation for mining operations that required a depopulated planet. You're planning genocide, he said quietly. We're planning economic development, Torres corrected. The native population can either participate in that development or relocate to territories that don't contain valuable mineral deposits. Their choice. And if they refuse to relocate? Then they become obstacles to human progress, and obstacles must be removed. Captain Kane's hand rested casually on his sidearm with the unconscious gesture of someone who'd made similar removals before. Dr. Cross, Walsh said, your cooperation in this matter would be appreciated. Information about native capabilities and intentions could help us minimize casualties during the transition period. Transition period? The period during which native populations are relocated to make room for mining operations. Ethan looked around the conference table at people who were discussing the elimination of an entire civilization with the casual tone usually reserved for discussing quarterly production reports. And if I refuse to cooperate? Then you become part of the problem rather than part of the solution, Torres said with a smile that managed to be both pleasant and threatening. And problems require solutions. The meeting ended with Ethan's agreement to provide a full report on Valari capabilities and territorial claims within 48 hours. He walked back to the medical station in a state of moral crisis, knowing that anything he provided would be used to facilitate genocide, but also knowing that refusing to cooperate would result in his removal from the situation and Thura's elimination. He found Thura attempting to repair a damaged piece of medical equipment using techniques that seemed to involve singing to the broken components. Her approach was actually working, the device was responding to harmonic frequencies that somehow encouraged proper molecular alignment. Thura, he said, we have a problem. A very large problem. She looked up from her work, and her skin color immediately shifted to the deep red purple that indicated she was reading emotional distress from his proximity. The morning ceremonies? The morning ceremonies are the least of our problems. Someone is planning to eliminate your entire species to make room for mining operations. Her skin went completely white, a color change Ethan had never seen before and which somehow conveyed shock more effectively than any human expression he'd ever witnessed. "All of us," she whispered. "All of you. And they want me to provide intelligence that will help them do it efficiently." She was quiet for a long moment, her skin cycling through colors that suggested she was processing information at levels Ethan couldn't comprehend. Finally, she looked at him with an expression of terrible clarity. "Dr. Ethan Cross, I need to ask you another question. When the time comes to choose between your people and mine, which will you choose?" Ethan looked at the 12-foot-tall alien woman who'd become his patient, his responsibility, and something approaching his friend. "I've already chosen, Thera. The question is whether we can get you back to your people before the miners eliminate us both." The escape from Haven's Rest required the kind of creative rule-breaking that Ethan had never imagined himself capable of, but which apparently became possible when the alternative was complicity in genocide. Breaking Thera out of the medical station while she was still recovering from near-fatal injuries was challenging enough without having to factor in her 12-foot height, her limited mobility, and the fact that colonial security was expecting him to deliver intelligence reports that would facilitate her people's extermination. "The maintenance tunnels connect to the old geological survey shafts," he explained while helping her navigate through spaces designed for human-sized personnel. "It's going to be uncomfortable, but we can reach the perimeter without using the main corridors." Uncomfortable turned out to be an optimistic assessment. Thera had to crawl through most of the tunnel system, her massive frame barely fitting through passages that Ethan could navigate upright. Her injuries, still healing despite Valari physiology's remarkable recovery capabilities, made every movement painful. But her determination to reach her people and warn them of the impending threat overrode physical discomfort. "Dr. Ethan Cross," she said during a rest break in a maintenance junction, "you are risking everything to help people you have never met. Your own species will consider you a traitor." "Some of my species will consider me a traitor," Ethan corrected. "Others will consider me someone who chose to do the right thing when doing the wrong thing would have been easier." Her skin color shifted through several shades of what he'd learned to recognize as complex emotional processing. Valari culture has no concept of betraying one's birth species for moral principles. It is difficult to understand. Maybe that's because Valari culture never developed the capacity for genocide. When your species is naturally cooperative, you don't need moral frameworks for resisting systematic evil. And human culture developed such frameworks because humans are capable of systematic evil. Ethan considered this while checking his scanner for security patrol patterns. Humans are capable of extraordinary kindness and extraordinary cruelty, sometimes from the same individuals. Our moral frameworks exist because we need them to choose kindness when cruelty would be more profitable. They emerged from the tunnel system at the settlement's outer perimeter just as the first transport ships began descending from orbit. The vessels were clearly military rather than colonial, sleek, angular designs built for rapid deployment of personnel and equipment rather than long-term habitation or research. "The miners are moving faster than expected," Ethan said, watching the ship settle into landing formations. "We need to reach your people before those troops finish deploying." The journey through the forest surrounding Haven's Rest became a running battle against time, terrain, and Thera's injuries. She pushed herself beyond reasonable physical limits, using techniques that seemed to involve directing her body's healing processes through conscious control rather than passive recovery. Her skin color shifted constantly as she managed pain, fear, determination, and what Ethan was beginning to recognize as a form of empathic connection to the land around them. "The trees are afraid," she said during a brief rest beside a stream that ran through the ancient forest. "They feel the wrongness approaching, the intention to destroy rather than nurture. Trees feel fear. All living things feel fear when faced with extinction. Your people simply ignore the signals because they are inconvenient." The sound of aircraft overhead indicated that Captain Kane's forces were conducting search patterns, looking for the escaped doctor and his alien patient. The sophisticated tracking equipment they'd undoubtedly deployed meant that staying ahead of pursuit would require more than just speed and determination. They reached the sacred grove just as the sun was setting, and Ethan got his first glimpse of what Thera meant when she described the memory trees. They were massive, ancient organisms that seemed to pulse with their own internal light, their bark carved with intricate patterns that shifted and changed as he watched. The grove itself felt alive in ways that transcended individual trees. It was an ecosystem, a network, a living library that had been growing for thousands of years. It was also surrounded by 200 Valari warriors in full ceremonial gear. The Valari response to Thera's appearance was immediate and overwhelming. Her people rushed toward her with expressions of relief, joy, and protective fury that needed no translation. But their reaction to Ethan was more complex. Gratitude mixed with suspicion, recognition of his role in saving their mediator balanced against wariness of human intentions. The tribal council that convened in the Grove Center was unlike anything in Ethan's experience. Valari leadership apparently operated through consensus building rather than hierarchical authority, with each speaker contributing information while others listened with empathic attention that allowed them to sense emotional truth beneath spoken words. The human speaks truly about the mining conspiracy, announced Elder Silphira after listening to Ethan's report. His emotional resonance indicates genuine concern for our survival rather than deception or hidden agenda. But he is still human, pointed out war leader Theron, a massive Valari whose scars suggested extensive combat experience. His people are the threat. How do we know this is not an elaborate trap? Because he chose to risk everything to warn us, Thera said firmly. Because he treated me as a person when his leaders wanted to treat me as an object. Because his actions demonstrate the possibility of cooperation rather than exploitation. The debate continued for hours, with Valari representatives sharing intelligence about mining consortium activities, discussing defensive strategies, and evaluating options that ranged from negotiated relocation to armed resistance. Through it all, Ethan sat quietly, aware that his presence was tolerated rather than welcomed, grateful for the opportunity to witness decision-making processes that were simultaneously alien and admirable. The sound of approaching aircraft interrupted the council session. Captain Kane's forces had finally tracked them to the grove, and the distinctive whine of military transport engines indicated that this wasn't a reconnaissance mission. War leader, called a Valari scout from the grove's perimeter, human forces are deploying in assault formation. Heavy weapons, energy shields, equipment designed for large-scale combat operations. Theron stood, his massive frame radiating the kind of controlled violence that made Ethan grateful to be considered a non-combatant. Then we make our stand here, in the place where our ancestors' wisdom is preserved. If we must die, we die protecting what cannot be replaced. The other Valari began moving with practiced efficiency, taking positions that would maximize the grove's natural defensive advantages while minimizing exposure to human weapons. But Ethan could see that despite their size, strength, and intimate knowledge of the terrain, they were facing military technology specifically designed to neutralize their advantages. Captain Kane's voice echoed through the grove via amplified speakers, carrying the arrogant confidence of someone accustomed to having superior firepower resolve complicated situations. This is Captain Kane of Torres Security Solutions. You are harboring a fugitive colonial official and interfering with authorized resource extraction operations. Surrender Dr. Cross and disperse immediately, or face military action. They want you to surrender, Thera said, moving to stand beside Ethan. If you return with them, my people might be allowed to evacuate peacefully. And if I refuse? Then they kill everyone here and report that we died resisting legal mining operations. Ethan looked around the sacred grove at 200 Valari warriors preparing to die rather than abandon their cultural heritage. He looked at the memory trees whose destruction would eliminate thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. He looked at Thera, whose people had spent centuries developing cooperative solutions to problems that humans typically resolve through violence. Then he looked at the military forces surrounding the grove, equipped with weapons designed to kill efficiently and deployed by people who viewed genocide as a business opportunity. The choice, when it came, was surprisingly easy. Captain Kane, Ethan called out, walking toward the grove's center where his voice would carry clearly, I decline your offer. I'm staying with the Valari. Dr. Cross, you are a colonial medical officer. You have obligations to human interests. I'm a doctor. My obligation is to preserve life, not facilitate murder. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of weapons being charged and targeting systems coming online. Captain Kane had apparently decided that negotiation was less efficient than elimination. All Valari personnel have 30 seconds to disperse before we commence pacification operations. Dr. Cross, you have 30 seconds to reconsider your position. Ethan felt time stretching like elastic as he processed the magnitude of what was about to happen. In less than 30 seconds, military-grade weapons would begin firing into a grove filled with people whose only crime was wanting to preserve their cultural heritage. The memory trees would burn, the Valari warriors would die, and an entire civilization would be erased to make room for mining operations. Unless someone could find a way to change the equation. He walked to the grove's perimeter, where the first line of Valari warriors had taken defensive positions behind the massive memory trees. Thera followed him, her massive frame moving with surprising grace despite her healing injuries. Dr. Ethan Cross, she said quietly, you do not have to die with us. Your people will kill you for choosing our side, but that does not mean you must choose to die. Sometimes choosing sides means accepting the consequences of that choice. The sound of weapons powering up indicated that Captain Kane's 30-second deadline was approaching. Energy weapons designed to penetrate Valari physiology were being aimed at targets throughout the grove, and Ethan could see tactical displays indicating that the attackers had positioned themselves to create overlapping fields of fire that would eliminate any possibility of escape. Commence firing, Captain Kane's voice commanded. The moment that defined everything came when Ethan saw the energy weapons swinging toward Thera's position. She was standing beside one of the largest memory trees, her massive form making her an obvious priority target for soldiers trained to eliminate leadership first. Without conscious thought, without planning or calculation or consideration of consequences, Ethan stepped directly in front of her. His human-sized body was laughably inadequate to shield someone of Thera's dimensions, but he spread his arms wide and planted his feet firmly, making himself as large a barrier as his small frame could manage. The gesture was tactically meaningless, strategically pointless, and personally suicidal. It was also the most important thing he had ever done. The sight of a single human doctor standing between military-grade weapons and a 12-foot-tall alien warrior created a moment of pure absurdity that stopped the attack cold. Soldiers trained for efficient elimination of designated targets found themselves facing a situation their tactical manuals hadn't covered. What to do when a member of your own species deliberately shields the enemy with his own body. The battlefield silence stretched for seconds that felt like hours while Captain Kane processed this unprecedented development. Dr. Cross, came his voice through the amplifiers, step away from the alien. You are interfering with lawful military operations. I'm interfering with genocide, Ethan called back, his voice carrying clearly through the grove. And I'm staying right here. Dr. Cross, if you don't move, you will be fired upon along with your alien associates. Then I guess you'll be firing upon a colonial medical officer who's trying to prevent the systematic murder of an intelligent species. Behind him, Ethan could feel Thera's massive presence and hear her quiet breathing. Around him, he could see Valari warriors who had positioned themselves to protect the memory trees and the cultural heritage they represented. Above him, the ancient canopy filtered starlight through leaves that had been growing since before humans had discovered space travel. Captain Kane, he continued, I'm sending a full report of Torres Security's genocide operation to Colonial Command, the Interstellar Ethics Council, and every major news network in human space. Whatever you do here is going to be very, very public. The silence that followed was different from the previous pauses. It was the silence of someone making calculations that involved political consequences rather than just tactical considerations. Captain, came a new voice through the military communications channel, this is Administrator Walsh. Abort the current operation and return to base for debriefing. Administrator, the targets are in position for elimination. We can complete the mission in under 10 minutes. Captain Kane, you are ordered to abort immediately. Colonial Command has questions about the authorization for this operation. The sound of weapons powering down was like music played on instruments designed to celebrate the continuation of existence rather than its termination. Military transport ships began lifting off, carrying soldiers who had come to commit genocide and were leaving with their mission incomplete. Ethan remained standing in front of Thera until the last aircraft had disappeared beyond the forest canopy. Only then did he allow himself to collapse, his legs giving out as adrenaline finally released its hold on his nervous system. Dr. Ethan Cross, Thera said, kneeling beside him with careful attention to his smaller scale, you stood between weapons and my body with nothing but your own flesh as protection. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Among my people, someone who shields another with their own body becomes more than friend, more than ally. They become chosen family, bound by courage rather than birth. What does that mean, practically speaking? Her skin color shifted to the warm gold that he'd learned indicated deep contentment. It means that wherever you go, you will have a home among the Valari. It means that whatever you need, my people will provide. It means that when the history of this day is sung by future generations, your name will be remembered as the human who proved that cooperation was possible. Ethan looked around the sacred grove at memory trees that continued to pulse with their ancient light, at Valari warriors who were beginning to relax their defensive positions, at a living library that would continue growing for thousands of years because one person had chosen to stand between weapons and the people he'd learned to care about. Thera, he said, I think I'd like to learn more about Valari healing traditions. It seems like my people have a lot to learn from yours about treating illness before it becomes fatal. Her laugh echoed through the grove like the sound of growing things celebrating another day of existence. I think that can be arranged, Dr. Ethan Cross. After all, you are family now. Above them, the memory trees continued their ancient work of preserving knowledge and nurturing life, while somewhere in the forest, two species began the slow process of learning to build bridges instead of walls.